It's been dubbed as the biggest political event of the year and America's most important election ever. The US presidential election 2020. The stage is now set for an epic showdown between two presidential contenders, Republican President Donald Trump.
The more you lie and demean and collude, the more credibility you lose, and we will win.
And his political rival, former Vice President Joseph Biden of the Democratic Party.
He fails to protect us from the pandemic, from an economic freefall, from racial unrest, from the ravages of climate change. It's clear that we're not safe in Donald Trump's America.
The election is scheduled to take place during one of the most turbulent periods in American political history. The country is now in the throes of one of its worst health crises ever. COVID-19 has killed more than 220,000 of its citizens so far. It's also battling feverishly to keep its economy afloat.
Now about 2/3 of Americans think the country's on the wrong track, and only 1/3 think it's on the right track. So that's a pretty sour mood.
There is a great deal of anxiety and concern about the pandemic, and that is really central in the election.
And it's not just Americans who are anxious and divided. Asia, Latin America, Europe, Southeast Asia, all watching with anxiety and hand-wringing, not just for the results, but what it means for the rest of the world.
The region as a whole also suffers because of the fixation of the Trump administration on trade deficits and bilateral trade deals.
At the end of the day, trade requires stability and predictability.
This is a battle.
Which of the two candidates will be able to provide the stability that Asia needs? Will it be Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Will the region's future be better served under 4 more years of President Donald Trump? Or has the time come for Americans to elect a new president? On November 3rd, 2020, Americans will go to the polls to elect the country's commander-in-chief for the next 4 years. And it will be a choice between two political rivals with two starkly different visions for America and two contrasting personalities. Representing the Republican Party is an energetic, aggressively unpredictable, audacious and adversarial Donald Trump.
Why wouldn't I want anybody other than Trump? He's amazing. He's for the American people. He's put America first, and we're seeing tremendous growth in our economy, in everything that he promised he's done. So we need 4 more years of that.
You can determine the outcome of this election.
On the other side of the political divide is a calm, even-tempered, and level-headed Joe Biden from the Democratic Party.
In 2020, I'm voting for the Biden-Harris ticket. For me, it's important in making sure that there's going to be a continuation of environmental protections, a protection of women's rights, the rights of people of color. Also having a plan for creating jobs, for focusing on the environment. They have a plan for creating new energy.
The choice that Americans will make at the polls is also reflective of the deep polarization within the society along geographic, racial, political, and ideological lines. And that trend has become more evident during the Trump era. Today, it's no longer a fight between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, or the Republicans versus the Democrats. But it's between urban and rural, the rich and poor, and the liberals versus the conservatives.
It's quite clear that over the last few years, the American electorate has become so polarized, not just ideologically, but even on specific issues, and everything has become so politicized.
At a time when America is so divided and so polarized, Joe Biden is a figure who unites people. He can bring people together. And so in that sense, if America needs to go through a process of healing to repair the deep divisions that have emerged, especially since Trump became president.
That division has become even more pronounced as the election draws near. And it comes as America and the world are battling a once-in-a-century public health crisis. COVID-19 has killed more than 1 million people in less than a year. America alone has recorded almost 220,000 deaths from the disease. The outbreak has also ignited an economic crisis not seen since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The economic downturn has resulted in millions of job losses.
The U.S. has responded very poorly to the coronavirus pandemic. The economy is starting to come back, but we're down about 11 million jobs from where we were a year ago. We have these racial justice issues. So right now, pretty sour mood in the United States.
In fact, not just, the economy and health crisis, but in the recent terms, the protests, the civil unrest, that's something, Americans have also been fairly deeply upset about.
The supporters of Trump, and they form a very strong, steady base, I must emphasize that, especially coming from the white working classes. They are also very angry because they feel that America has let them down, and that all the privileges have gone either to the rich or to the minorities, and the interests of the white working classes have been ignored. And to some extent, there's some justification for what they believe.
The opinion poll results so far have been remarkably consistent. Less than 3 weeks to Election Day, national and state polling data in October clearly indicate that Democratic candidate Joe Biden is enjoying a comfortable lead over Mr. Trump by at least 10 percentage points. Still, some observers feel that Trump's chances at re-election cannot be entirely ruled out.
I think it would be a big mistake to underestimate Donald Trump. And remember that at this point in time, in October 2016, everyone thought that Hillary Clinton would win, that Donald Trump would lose. So now we're in the same situation. Everybody thinks Biden will win, Donald Trump will lose. So don't count him out, don't count him out. But nonetheless, on the Biden side, it's very clear that Biden is in a much stronger position in October. And in some ways, Trump has helped him a lot. Because Donald Trump keeps saying that Joe Biden is senile, can't put two sentences together, is so weak. But as you could see, even in the very first debate that happened between Trump and Biden, Biden stood quite firm and responded quite strongly.
A lot of people have been waiting for this night, so let's get going.
Far fewer people are dying. We've done a great job. The only thing I haven't done a good job, and that's because of the fake news. No matter what you say to them, they give you bad press on it. It's just fake news.
The president has no plan. He hasn't laid out anything. He knew all the way back in February how serious this crisis was. He knew it was a deadly disease. What did he do? He's on tape as acknowledging he knew it.
We got the gowns, we got the
But the
masks.
first TV debate between the two candidates was described as a total disaster.
Unless they're stupid.
The tone was anything but civil.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
There were constant name-calling, shouting, and insults.
Keep yapping, man.
The people
The
understand you.
heckling and constant interruptions by Donald Trump had also prevented any form of coherent and constructive discussion.
Need the help.
Did the TV debate move the needle or change the minds of undecided voters?
And now we're weeks away from a vaccine.
Debates in general are not talking about policy issues, but rather they have become barbs against each other. So that has redefined American political history as well in a way.
Debates had the potential to be important, but the way that the first presidential debate panned out I think was not a positive outcome for the American people. The candidates did not have they didn't seize the opportunity to articulate their own visions. Instead, they were just talking over each other. And I think that most people who watched them agreed that it was a bad performance.
In the second and final debate, however, both candidates appeared more restrained and were able to present their ideas in a calm and deliberate manner. But by then, more than 47 million Americans had already cast their ballot, and it was done either through early in-person voting or postal votes. The two TV debates, therefore, may not have a significant impact on the outcome of the polls. But that had not stopped candidates from reaching out to the voters in the midst of a pandemic. Mr. Trump had consistently ignored the signs of wearing a mask or observe social distancing as he crisscrossed America on his re-election campaign trail, holding large public rallies. Joe Biden, on the other hand, limited his outreach to mostly an online and virtual presence to minimize health risks of public gatherings to his supporters. So when Trump announced that he was infected by COVID-19 on October 2nd, many, including top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci, were not surprised. For a while there, his campaign was thrown into disarray. For a president who has been trumpeting his own purported achievements in handling the pandemic, it's baffling to see that even the most powerful and most protected person on Earth could get infected by the virus. But how has President Trump's COVID-19 infection changed the momentum of the election?
Where Trump has tripped quite significantly, and he hasn't been able to, for example, persuade most Americans that indeed the mishandling of COVID has nothing to do with me, and I've handled it quite well. I mean, the fact that he himself got it and a lot in his circle in the White House are afflicted or have been afflicted and are afflicted by COVID doesn't lend to that narrative.
In theory, he could have got some sympathy when he fell prey to COVID-19, but there wasn't very much. And sadly, there's a German word, Schadenfreude, which I think captures the responses of many in America who said, you didn't heed our warnings, you didn't take the precautions, so you deserve it.
American voters who elected Donald Trump in 2016 on his promise of America First will have to decide if he has indeed delivered on that promise and to give him another 4 years. But has damage been done to the US-Asia alliances as he pursued the America First policy? Has Asia benefited from President Trump's leadership in the last 4 years? Will the region be better off without him at the helm? October in Pennsylvania, USA. The hot summer days are over and autumn is in the air. As the days get shorter and temperatures get cooler, the leaves have begun to change color. For 63-year-old farmer Rick Teles, fall is a usually happy and busy time for him as he prepares for the harvest of his soybeans. But that's no longer the case ever since President Trump took over the leadership of the country 4 years ago. Even a bountiful harvest will not compensate for Rick's mounting losses and growing despair due to the deep plunge in the sales of his soybeans and its prices.
You take this administration, last 4 years, you could probably, I don't know if there's anything positive you could say that he's done for agriculture.
Strongest in American history by far.
Since 2018, both the world's first and second largest economies have been embroiled in a bruising trade war with each other. President Trump has been ratcheting up pressure on China to reduce the trade imbalances through a series of tariffs on numerous Chinese goods. Beijing then responded by imposing retaliatory measures on US products. Since then, Rick has seen the export price for his soybeans fall by at least 20%. In addition, his imports of machinery and chemicals, mostly from China, are now 20% more expensive.
My cash price for beans went from $10.20 to $7.40. And you put the added costs up front on my inputs of 17 to 20%, and you start adding those numbers together, we're talking 40%, upwards of 40%, and no way of passing those costs on. I mean, that is something I had to absorb. So, as far as trade goes, the American farmer, it was a loss all the way around.
Rick Tellez voted for Donald Trump in 2016 in the hope that Mr. Trump will help provide a boost to the agricultural industry and create more jobs in the country. But he ended up feeling shortchanged by Mr. Trump and his policies. And he said he won't be making that mistake again.
He was going to drain the swamp. He was going to bring back jobs to America. I had no reason not to vote for him. To me, he was going to be a change. Something from the same old, same old. It didn't take long to realize I made a mistake.
Hardest hitting action against China. Let China continue stealing our jobs, ripping us off.
One of Trump's early proclamations was trade wars are good and easy to win. And China has been the target of Trump's relentless attacks. He has not only applied tariffs on a wide range of Chinese goods worth hundreds of billions of dollars, he has also turned his anger on China's tech giant Huawei, as well as China's popular apps TikTok and WeChat. Since the war of tariffs began in 2018, there has been no clear winner. In the US, the continuing trade war has led to higher prices for consumers and caused financial difficulties for farmers. In China, the trade war contributed to a slowdown in the rate of economic and industrial output growth. When Trump took office in 2017, the US national debt was $19.5 billion. Today, the national debt stands at $26.5 billion.
President Trump brought a particular protectionist perspective. He made a big issue about the trade deficit of the US, and he's waged trade wars with lots of different countries, imposing import tariffs. I think the general sense in America now is that this has failed. The US trade deficit just gets bigger and bigger. It hit the highest number in many, many years with the August data. So that hasn't worked.
39-year-old Qin Xiong is the general manager of a factory in precision metals processing in Shenzhen, China. The company made its fortune from supplying computer and phone parts, firstly to Motorola and later to Huawei Technologies. In fact, Motorola was its first international client when the factory was set up in 2004, just 3 years after China joined the World Trade Organization. Those early days were the company's golden years.
04年我们成立公司呢，实际上当时的我们的就是做的订单呢，其实都是非常零散的订单就是我们只能够去承接公司刚成立。我们当时呢，只能够去承接就是一些大厂或者是一些做了很多年的工厂，他们不愿意去承接的一些订单所以当时呢，我们其实营业额是很小的但是承接到接受到就是摩托的这一款订单以后，其实我们的整个的营业额和业绩呢是翻了接近10倍的。
But in 2018, Huawei Technologies made a major breakthrough in the use of smartphone technology. It became the second largest global seller of smartphones, surpassing even Apple, garnering 19% of the worldwide market share, compared to some 12% for Apple. The US then put Huawei on the trade blacklist, accusing the company of being a spy for the Chinese government. It has also barred the global tech company from purchasing strategic parts and components from American companies, thereby crippling all of Huawei's immediate expansion plans. And as a supplier of phone parts to Huawei, Kin Xiong's revenue significantly evaporated overnight. He's, however, reluctant to dwell too much into the losses that the company has suffered as a result of the ban.
我们自己工厂那一块呢，做华为做手机这一类的，目前呢大概占到我们33% 的份额。实际上呢，我们还有差不多60%的一个份额的部分呢是在去做其他一些产业。当然，可能前面有一段时间呢，可能是因为我们跟华为这条线的合作了已经有很多年了所以之前呢，在今年的上半年的时候呢，在订单上面呢是会有一些影响，就是有一段时间的这个订单量呢是有一定的下滑。
The Chinese will suffer from it, as will Southeast Asian states, Singapore, as will the United States, as will Japan, Korea, everyone. So it's difficult to pinpoint one state that will suffer exponentially from this. If we want to consider that, then obviously it will be the most open economies in the region, and that puts us in that list.
Tariffs have made Chinese goods expensive in the US. They've also hurt suppliers or rather producers from American firms who are manufacturing in China, and they've hurt Americans in that sense because relocating supply manufacturing lines is not so easy. It doesn't happen overnight. So clearly American firms have been hurt already.
Rick Tellez has tried to warn his friends and other farmers in his county on the perils of a second term for Trump. But he's resigned to the fact that it's not going to be easy to sway the farmers' vote, which has traditionally been pro-Republican.
Most farmers are registered Republicans. And to me, that's a start. To me, that's where you start as far as what's at fault with this government. Because whenever you have to decide what party you want to register to, you're almost committed to a team and to a brand. And people are brand loyal. And 85% of that royal community are registered Republicans.
Despite the apparent brand loyalty to the Republican Party and Donald Trump, national and state polling data at this point show a comfortable leading margin for Joe Biden of the Democratic Party. But after the disastrous polling data of 2016, which had pointed to a Hillary Clinton victory, why should we trust the polls again? 2020 is no ordinary year for most people. The year has been marked by a deadly pandemic, which has ravaged the lives of millions around the world and left economies in tatters. But can Joe Biden do the right thing? Will he be able to offer anything different for America and the rest of the world?
I'm running as a proud Democrat, but I will govern as an American president. I work for Democrats and Republicans. I work for those who vote against me as hard as those who voted for me. That's the job of a president, to heal.
'77-year-old Joe Biden entered the 2020 presidential race with a very strong name recognition. For 8 years, he served as vice president under former President Barack Obama.
That's the kind of person who
Mr. Obama himself once said that selecting Joe Biden as his running mate in 2008 was one of the best decisions he ever made by virtue of his knowledge, insight, and judgment. While well-known Democrats such as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren dominated the party race in early days, Biden emerged as the crowd favorite, especially among Democrat primary voters.
This was a wide open field with about 20 Democratic candidates if we go back a year. And some of them are very well-known progressives. Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist. Elizabeth Warren says she's a capitalist, but she's definitely on the far left of the US political spectrum. And as the campaign progressed, the ordinary American people showed an overwhelming preference for Joe Biden, who's really, we put him in the middle of that Democratic pack. We say he's a moderate, but frankly, his views are a lot more progressive than anyone we've ever had for president before.
The advantage that Joe Biden has over Hillary Clinton, who failed, is that Joe Biden can connect with the working classes, including the white working classes in America. Hillary Clinton couldn't. I mean, she was, to quote my friends in America, a flawed candidate. And so in that sense, Joe Biden is a much stronger candidate than Hillary Clinton. And I would say the odds are still of him winning.
49-year-old Charity Nicholas is a first-generation immigrant. She and her parents left the Philippines in the 1970s when martial law was imposed. She works in the field of environment management in San Francisco and is passionate about issues relating to climate change. But all her energy these days is focused on getting her community and especially the youths to vote in what she describes as a critical election.
The mood is very tense. I can feel it. I feel like it absorbs, everything outside of work. It absorbs my mind, my time, and I feel that it's the same way for a lot of my friends. Watching the debates was very traumatic.
The last 4 years have been a fearful time for Charity. She's witnessed the systematic dismantling of causes she holds dear, including environmental protection, climate change, and rights and protection of minorities.
The White House executive order that was recently passed to stop diversity and equity and inclusion training all across the board in government agencies, I think that's a move in the wrong direction. I've always been a supporter of Biden, even when he was vice president under Obama. It's really about creating laws that are going to support people. He's done that in the support for women, protecting equal rights for women, protecting equal pay for women. And I also see that on the racial front as well, supporting rules and laws that will support diversity, that will support more people of color coming into higher education.
Over in rural Pennsylvania, soybeans farmer Rick Tellez is deeply worried about the effects of climate change on agriculture. He feels that the Trump administration has paid little attention to such matters. And worst of all, he has rolled back on progressive steps to tackle the climate crisis.
Under Obama and Biden, the government came up with a renewable fuel standards where you had to use so much biofuels or renewable energy in transportation fuel. So, that meant creating ethanol and biodiesel. And these markets grew, and they grew because of the policies of Biden and Obama. And Trump comes in, and he, through EPA, is starting to cut the standards and wanting to hand out exemptions and just basically undercutting the renewable fuel industry. It affects me, it affects my price on my commodities, but hey, it affects everybody worldwide.
One of the key things that I've seen in the last 4 years is the rollback of many environmental regulations that are supposed to protect the air, water, and land here in the U.S. And because of that, you're seeing loopholes for large companies to be able to dump and pollute all of our air, water, and land. And for me, that's a big worry. It's a big worry for future generations, because once they start dumping, it's going to take hundreds of years in order to clean that up.
Joe Biden's pledge to reverse some of President Trump's policies has now further energized his base. His top priorities include rejoining the Paris Agreement on climate change, the World Health Organization, and to restore American leadership on the world stage.
What's been missing the last few years is the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Accord and is not paying attention to climate change. We've pulled out of trade agreements. So I think what you would see in the Biden administration is re-engagement with the world, some rationalization of our trade war toward China, hopefully ratcheting down the tariffs.
However, one critical issue that won't change, whether under a Biden or Trump administration, and that is the U.S. policies towards China, a country it regards as a strategic rival.
He became the first president to stand up to China comprehensively. And the trade war that he launched against China was clearly a signal that the United States was getting very alarmed about the rise of China and was trying to put a brake on China's rise. And I think to Trump's surprise, he's been opposed by the Democrats on everything he's done. Everything he does, the Democrats say, no, you're wrong. But when he started bashing China, the Democrats said, go for it, we are with you. So there's a complete bipartisan consensus on China.
The Democrats really have also signaled that they are going to be tough on China. But the question has always been how they're going to do that. A Biden administration will pursue a more multilateral approach to China policy, to pushing back China or holding the line with regards to China. It shows that the United States is prepared to resume a role as a leader, right? And a leader in the context of multilateral efforts, working with friends, working with allies. You can take a tough line on China, but at the same time also find pockets where there can be cooperation.
I would say the first Obama administration was very friendly to China. And then since then, the U.S. attitudes have started hardening, even before Trump was elected. So I would not expect President Biden to go back to where we were in the first Obama administration. So some of the technology measures, security issues, human rights concerns, all of these are going to still be there with the Biden presidency. So it's not going to be a warm and fuzzy relationship with China.
Evidence so far seems to show that Mr. Biden is well ahead of Mr. Trump, according to several opinion polls. But he may still lose the election if he fails to win the Electoral College majority. Contrary to popular belief, Americans do not directly vote for their president. While they pick the names of the candidates they're voting for, they are actually casting their ballot for the representative of the party known as electors. Those electors will then vote in the Electoral College for the candidates who got the highest popular votes in that state on behalf of the people. For example, take the popular vote and the Electoral College ballot of 5 states. In State A, the popular vote has 6 reds and 3 blues. So, State A Electoral College ballot is red. This is repeated in States B and C. In State D, the popular vote has 1 red and 8 blues. State D Electoral College ballot is blue. This is repeated in State E. The total number of popular votes is 25 blues versus 20 reds. However, In terms of the Electoral College ballot, the winner is red because there are 3 reds and 2 blues. The reality is, a presidential candidate can win the popular vote but lose the election, which was what happened in 2016 when Hillary Clinton was leading in polling data and did indeed win the popular vote. But Donald Trump won the election because of the Electoral College.
It's not a question of who wins the most votes. The polls were right that Hillary Clinton won 3 million more votes, but we have this system of electoral college which makes it harder to predict.
There are a total of 538 electoral votes. 270 is the magic number needed to win the race to the White House. Opinion polls show that Joe Biden is leading in most of the battleground states that Donald Trump won in 2016. Despite Biden's substantial lead over Trump in the polls, there's a looming sense of déjà vu, probably from the specter of Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016. The race and the swing states remain close, giving Trump enough room to pull off yet another victory. So, is Asia preparing for another 4 years of Trump, or a new chapter with Biden? Less than a week before Americans cast their ballot, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going on the offensive, crisscrossing the country to make their final pitches to voters. One of their main priorities is to win over volatile swing voters in key battleground states where the election is likely to be decided. And that includes states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Florida. But while it remains unclear where the political pendulum will swing, especially for these states, as far as Asia is concerned, the choice seems pretty obvious, at least for now. International trade has always been the lifeblood of Asia. But that relationship has come under tremendous stress since Mr. Trump came to power 4 years ago. His obsession with the country's long-running trade deficits and his America First policy have led to a radical shift in the international world order. For example, there's been an absence of US participation in multilateral trade arrangements with Asian nations, with the US retreating and becoming increasingly protectionist. America's trade friction with China has also radically altered and disrupted the world's commercial landscape and supply chains. And that has led to a record slump in global exports.
But I think most of Asia have become losers in the trade war because at the end of the day, trade requires stability and predictability, right? Remember, if you're a businessman, you're going to sign a contract, right? Contract for delivery 2 years down the road, right? If you have stability, you say, okay lah, it should be okay 2 years from now. But with Trump, you cannot tell what's going to happen 2 weeks from now. So when you sign contracts, maybe, maybe not, maybe there'll be a problem kind of thing. So that instability and unpredictability is bad for East Asia. And to make matters worse, as you know, one of the wisest things that President Obama did was to launch the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because that would have anchored the United States' presence in East Asia and also, frankly, given a boost to trade within East Asia also. But Donald Trump unwisely pulled out of the TPP and therefore giving China a geopolitical gift by withdrawing from the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
The global economy in general is definitely not better under Trump because given the impact on trade and how so many countries are trade reliant and export reliant, given disruptions to various manufacturing and supply chains, the global economies in general become more protectionist.
Well, I think that the Trump administration in implementing tariffs alienated many of U.S. allies, and that set a tone for tension in relations with allies that endures today. It was the application of America First to trade. Even before that, the U.S. decision to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership had a very negative impact on the U.S. reputation in the region.
But apart from getting sucked into a trade and technology war with China, President Trump also took the decision in May this year to halt entry of some Chinese graduate students to the US, having accused them of stealing intellectual property. And that has left many international Chinese students in limbo. 24-year-old Miu Chen is from Guiyang, a city of 4.5 million people in central China. For 8 years now, the young man has been faithfully building his lifelong dream to study in the United States. His dream came true this year in March when he was accepted to an American college to study information technology.
I was in high school, so at that time I knew I must go abroad to study more professional knowledge. I go to United States to study information security because I think the United States has the best educational resources in the world. So if I go there, I can deepen my computer science knowledge. That's best for me.
Miu was supposed to start the school term in September 2020, but his dream grinded to an abrupt halt following the rapid spread of the COVID-19 pandemic in the US.
I defer my offer until 20 and 21 spring. That's a tough decision for me. And that's because my family members worry about the pandemic. After a lot of discussions, I spent almost 8 years for chasing my dream. I don't want to give up.
But more than the pandemic, another bigger worry weighs heavily on his mind: the worsening relationship between the US and China.
The relationship between China and the United States will be on a gradual downward trend in recent years. But I think this is an inevitable outcome for both strong countries. But I think they can see the possibilities of win-win, not always zero-sum game. But at present, these are bad news for us, for students. It was terrible about, the trade war. It was terrible because my family had relatives who were, and suffered in the trade war, and they were almost bankrupt.
I think most of Asia would welcome a shift in policy. Most of our allies are pretty careful to stay out of our politics, so I think they would express it as a preference about policies. I think people would like to see stable relation between the US and China, and what I hear overwhelmingly is they don't want to have to choose between the US and China. They don't see any need for that.
I think that countries in the region would hope for the United States to have a president that has more credibility and would take their interests into account. So I think that there is, at least in some capitals in Asia, a desire to see the next president be Biden.
But the question of whether another 4 years of Trump in the White House or a brand new Biden administration is better for Asia is not so easy to answer. It also remains unclear how it will impact China, especially in the era of the great power competition between the two countries.
So in the case of Donald Trump, he will be in the short term more painful for China because he will take all kinds of impulsive actions, like banning Huawei, TikTok, and so on and so forth. But in the long run, he's actually a gift to China because a very senior Western figure, I cannot give you his name because he's very influential, told me, Kishore, if Donald Trump is re-elected, it's the end of the West. the Western alliance will crash. And if it crashes, that's a gift to China, right? There cannot be a united Western approach to China. So in the case of Joe Biden, there will be a short-term gain for China because he won't be so erratic, so impulsive, won't have so many. I think the trade war will be managed more carefully. But in the long run, he's actually bad for China because the Western allies will come back to the United States.
For swing voters like soybeans farmer Rick Tellez, he sees the last 4 years as nothing but a trail of lies and failures on the part of the Trump administration in living up to the idea of the American dream. All he wants is to see a semblance of respect to return to America while cementing its position as a global leader.
Why did he put 300 million American lives at risk for corporate greed? So you ask me, why am I not voting for Trump? I tell you, that list, it grows and gets bigger daily. And then get some respect back to the office. You know, get some respect back to the country. Be proud to be called an American. Be proud to say that's my president.
Even though America's friends and adversaries in Asia and the rest of the world can only watch on the sidelines, there's no doubt that the 2020 US presidential elections is the most critical one, as well as one of the most fascinating ones in recent history. In the final sprint to November 3rd, is it still too early and too close a race to make a bet on who will be the final winner? The reality is, the world may have to brace itself for an inconclusive election outcome, sparked by a possible controversy over the use of postal ballots. The wave of uncertainty and a protracted standoff may lead to chaos and volatility in markets and beyond.
So we've also seen disputes in past elections between Bush and Al Gore. This will be even worse than that, in my opinion, because Trump has already said that, yes, he might not accept the results if they're not in his favor to a certain degree. He has voted by mail-in ballot himself in the past, but he still doesn't believe in the system. So he can backtrack on a lot of these issues. He can deny the fact that he has, been handed over in a lot of ways. And we don't expect it to be a very smooth transition either.
The big difference now is that Donald Trump has made it very clear that if he doesn't think he's lost the election, he may not accept the results. And that's something that America has never faced before. What do you do? I mean, do you send the military in to remove President Trump? What do you do? It's an amazing scenario. So with President Trump, things could get very, very bad. It's complicated. And you may end up where even though Joe Biden may have won the popular vote, because the Republicans control more state houses, they can send more representatives and they can win the election for Trump. So there are all kinds of horror scenarios that could be played out.
For now, Asia and the world can only watch and wait with bated breath how events will unfold after the November 3rd presidential election. Will Donald Trump win a second term in office? Or will it be a clear victory for Joe Biden in the race to the White House? Wherever the wind blows, the region will have no choice but to live with the outcome of the election, for better or for worse.